So today we're diving into a prophetic relationship that really tells a timeless story about power, a very fragile alliance, and ultimately a brutal betrayal. We're going to break down this fascinating model that interprets the dynamic between two huge symbolic figures from the book of Revelation, the harlot and the beast.
You know, the entire story we're about to unpack really comes down to this one big question. It sets the stage for this incredible high-stakes drama where two massive forces, religious authority on one side, political power on the other, try to use each other when they both know that at the end of the day, only one of them can come out on top.
Now, the key thing to get right off the bat is that this isn't a static relationship, not at all. It's a progression, a story in 3 acts. It kicks off with cooperation, a mutually beneficial arrangement. But then, as the power starts to shift, it decays into a bitter rivalry and, well, it ends with a complete and violent takeover.
Right, so before we jump into the timeline, we've got to be crystal clear on who our two main players are. So, let's meet the harlot and the beast.
Okay, let's break these two forces down. On one side, you've got the harlot. She represents religious authority. Her power? It's all about influence, tradition, and seduction. On the other side, you've got the beast, who is the embodiment of political power. His domain is pure muscle. We're talking executive force and military might.
The core difference really boils down to this. One of them uses influence, while the other wields a sword. You can think of it as the ultimate showdown between soft power and hard power. And this fundamental difference is exactly what shapes their entire relationship, right from the very beginning. Okay, so let's jump into phase 1 and see how this thing builds. For the first 3.5 years, their alliance is purely strategic. It is a true marriage of convenience.
The imagery used here is so powerful and incredibly specific. The harlot isn't running from the beast or beside it. She is riding it. And in this model, that means one thing: directional control. For the entire first half of this timeline, it's the religious authority that seems to be in the driver's seat, literally steering global political power. And this quote right here, it gets to the very heart of how her influence works. World leaders, the kings of the earth, they align themselves with her religious system. And why would they do that? Well, to legitimize their own political power, of course. It's a classic pattern we've seen throughout history, politics using religion to get the public on its side.
So here's the dynamic in a nutshell. The harlot provides all the religious cover, right? She's intoxicating the world with her traditions. But quietly, underneath it all, the beast is using her global network and her influence to build his own power base. She might have the spotlight, but he's the one building the empire behind the scenes. But this balance of power is incredibly fragile, and now we hit the midpoint, where 3 major catalytic events happen in really quick succession. They're like dominoes falling, one after another, and they completely upend the entire world order. These 3 events, a counterfeit resurrection, the silencing of divine witnesses, and then the final brutal destruction of the harlot herself, they are the pivot point for the entire story. They mark the beginning of this rivalry that just ignites and concludes with, frankly, astonishing speed.
Here's the first domino to fall. The beast gets what looks like a fatal wound, but he's healed. The whole world is stunned, and they begin to worship him directly. This is the big strategic shift. Suddenly, the beast doesn't need the harlot for awe and worship anymore because now he can generate his own.
Next up, the beast kills the 2 witnesses who represent God's testimony on earth. By doing this, he's not just taking out some opponents, he is making a global statement. He's proving that his authority is lethal and it's absolute. And just like that, tradition, the harlot's main tool, is replaced by fear, which is the beast's ultimate weapon.
And this brings us to the final shocking catalyst, the betrayal. The beast, now just overflowing with his own religious and political clout, has no more use for his old partner. He's done with her. He and his allies turn on her with this savage intensity. The alliance isn't just ended, it's severed in the most violent way you can possibly imagine.
With the harlot completely out of the picture, the stage is now set for the final phase. And listen, this isn't some kind of merger. This is a hostile takeover, a ruthless consolidation of all power into one single entity. This moment right here, this is what's known as the Great Transfer. What used to be 2 separate spheres of influence, the religious and the political, are now completely absorbed by the beast. He achieves uncontested global rule over, well, over everything. So what does this new world even look like? Well, for the next 42 months, it's an era of pure absolutism. Religion is no longer independent.
all worship is funneled directly to the beast. Politics become completely totalitarian, and the economy is under his absolute control. The harlot is ancient history. From here on out, it's the beast's show.
So you have to ask, what was the point of all this? What was the grand strategy? Well, this final section pulls back the curtain and reveals the end game that was in play from the very beginning.
It turns out the harlot was never the end goal. She was just a tool, a transitional instrument, a proxy. And the strategy was devastatingly effective. Step 1. Use an existing religious system to gain influence and power. Step 2. Once that power is secure, you eliminate that religious system. And the final move, Step 3, centralize all worship directly on the beast himself.
So let's do a super quick recap of the whole timeline. It starts with 3.5 years of harlot dominance. That leads directly into the midpoint crisis, where the beast rises and the harlot is utterly destroyed. And that event ushers in the final 3.5 years, the absolute, unchallenged reign of the beast.
And that, right there, reveals the core motivation behind this whole thing. This was never a story about a true alliance. It was about a ruthless, calculated path to absolute power. The harlot was simply used and then consumed so that the beast could stand alone, unchallenged. It leaves us with a final, chilling thought. What if the ultimate goal of power is never partnership, but always its own deification?